Good morning and welcome to the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Planning Committee meeting on the 23rd of July 2020. I will ask the Democratic Officer to read out the housekeeping notice regarding how this Skype meeting will be managed.
Thank you, Chairman. So please note that this meeting of the Planning Committee is being recorded by the Council for live and subsequent broadcast and will be published on the Council's website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone present follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to by the Chairman. State your name before you speak if you have not already been introduced. Please mute your microphone when you are not talking. After the committee has heard from the planning officer and received statements from the public and ward councillors, the chairman will ask committee members who wish to speak to do so by typing RTS, request to speak, in the instant message conversation panel on the bottom left-hand side of your screen. Please note this panel is visible to all parties in the call. Please do not use this panel for any other purpose than requesting to speak. The chairman will ask officers to respond or clarify as required. If at any point you would like to speak again, please again type RTS. Please note that when the vote is taken, the chairman will read out the name of each committee member in turn, and they will need to indicate whether they are voting for or against the move, or whether they are abstaining from the vote altogether. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and that mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Tyler. Do we have any apologies or substitutions for this meeting?
We do, Chair, and they are listed as, I believe, items 3 and 4 on the agenda.
Lovely. Thank you.
No problem at all. We can deal with those when we get there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, members. I will now ask each person participating in this meeting to state their name and their role. I will start with myself, Councillor Simon Bull, Chairman. Councillor Simon McCormack.
Councillor McCormack, Ward Member for Burton and Grange and Vice Chairman.
Councillor Barron.
Councillor Barron, Ward Councillor for Parkstone and Member of the Planning Committee.
Councillor Bartlett.
Good morning, Stephen Bartlett, Ward Member for Redhill and Northbourne Ward.
Councillor Davies.
Councillor Davies, Councillor for East Southbourne and Tapton.
Councillor Decent.
Chairman, Councillor Decent has been replaced by Councillor Butt for this meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Kelsey. Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I was indicating there to advise you of that. Councillor Judy Butt, a Ward Councillor for Creekmore, Hilborn and Waterloo. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Kelsley, for that intonation.
Thank you. Councillor Hall.
Councillor Peter Hall for Christchurch Town Centre.
Councillor Hilliard.
Paul Hilliard, Councillor for Muddyford, Purewell and West Highcliffe.
Councillor Johnson.
Councillor Toby Johnson, Ward Councillor for Alderney and Bourne Valley.
Councillor Kelsey.
Councillor Kelsey, Ward Councillor for Eastcliff and Springbourne.
Councillor Perdevin.
Marion Lepedvin, Councillor for Newtown and Heatherlands.
Councillor Lawton.
Councillor Bob Lawton, Councillor for West Southbourne.
Councillor O'Neill.
Tony O'Neill, Councillor for Penhill Ward.
Councillor Stribley.
Anne Stribley, Parkstone Ward Councillor.
Councillor Trent.
Councillor Trent, Councillor for Alderney and Bourne Valley.
Thank you, councillors. I shall now move on to officers. Mr. Gould.
Good morning, Chairman. Simon Gould, DM Manager, BCP Council.
Mr. Evans. Mr. Hodges.
Thank you, Chairman. David Hodges, Team Leader Development Management.
Mr. Burridge.
Thank you, Chairman. Peter Burridge, Senior Planning Officer, BCP Council.
Mrs. Barrable.
Thank you, Chairman. Nikki Barrable, I'm the Senior Planning and Highways Lawyer and Legal Advisor to the committee.
Thank you. I would like to point out to members that this is Mrs. Barrable's last meeting of the Planning Committee. I'd like to thank her on behalf of the committee for all her service she has given both to Bournemouth Borough Council and to BCP Council, and to thank her personally for all the help she's given me as chair over the last year. Thank you very much, Nikki.
Thank you, Chairman.
Moving on, Mr. Tyler.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Joe Tyler, Democratic and Overview and Scrutiny Officer, and I will be providing democratic support and clerking the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. In addition, there will be other planning officers for individual planning applications when they come up, and we also have officers from Democratic Services providing technical support to the meeting. I will now move on to the agenda items for this meeting. First item is the election of chair. I will seek nominations for election of chair. Nominations to be seconded. If more than one nomination received and seconded, we will need to go to a secret ballot for this item, which will be conducted electronically, and the meeting will not be broadcast while that takes place. Okay, I have a request to speak from Councillor Barron.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I requested first.
Sorry, Councillor Butt, I thought that was for the earlier item. No. Councillor Butt.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to propose Councillor David Kelsey as chairman of this planning committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder for that?
Yes, Tony O'Neill prepared to second.
Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. Are there any other Councillor Barron?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to propose yourself, Simon Bull, as Chair of the Standards Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that?
Yes, I'll be happy to second that, please.
Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. So we need to go to a vote. This will be a secret ballot. So, Richard, do you want to switch off the public? Oh, sorry, Councillor Anne Stribley.
Thank you, Chairman. Did I mishear? I thought Councillor Barron made a proposal for the chairman of the Standards Committee.
I don't think so. I think he said...
Yes, Mr. Chairman, he clearly made that. I'm sure it was an error, but he clearly said standards. I'm sure he will clarify himself.
Councillor Barron.
Yeah, apologies for that. Completely muddled up. It's been a bit of a tough 24 hours. So yeah, it's to propose Simon Bull as chair of the Planning Committee. Apologies.
Thank you. And Councillor McCormack, do you still wish to second that corrected motion?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Councillor. I totally understand, Councillor Barron, you're in the middle of moving house, and I imagine it's chaotic at the moment. We shall now go to an offline session for the secret ballot. Thank you. Welcome back to the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Planning Committee. I should go straight to Mr. Tyler for the results of the vote for Chair. Mr. Tyler.
Thank you, Chairman. So the total number of votes are as follows. The number of votes for Councillor Bull is 7, and the number of votes for Councillor Kelsey is 8. So on that, Councillor Kelsey has been elected Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tyler. Councillor Kelsey, congratulations.
Thank you, Chairman.
Do we need to adjourn at this point to take notes, or do you want to go into the vice? I'll leave it to you, Chair, to go to the Vice Chair vote.
We'll go straight into the Vice Chair, and then I'll talk with Nicola after that, Chair, if it's okay with you.
Yep, you're now Chair.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for all you've done.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, members, we will now go to the item 2 of the agenda, which is the election of the Vice Chair for the municipal year. And I will again ask for nominations for that position, please. Councillor Hilliard.
Yes, I wanted to nominate Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Councillor Hilliard. Do we have any other Councillor Stribley?
Sorry, Chairman. Joe Tyler, Democratic Services here. I just wondered if you wanted to seek a seconder to the nomination of Councillor McCormack.
Yes, please. Joe. Do we have a seconder for Councillor McCormack, please?
I'm happy to second that, Councillor Kelsey. Okay.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bull. Appreciate that. Councillor Stribley, you wish to speak? Councillor Stribley?
Sorry, Chairman. I'd like to nominate Councillor Bull.
Thank you. Do we have any other nominations for Vice Chair? And do we have a seconder for Councillor Bull, please?
I'm happy to second Councillor Bull. Thank you.
Thank you. As we only have the one nomination for Councillor Bull, there is no need to go for a secret ballot. Do all members agree to that?
Sorry, Chair. There was a nomination for Councillor McCormack.
Sorry, I appreciate that, Joe. My mistake.
No problem.
So we have two nominations. Are both members willing to accept the nominations?
I will decline in favour of Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Councillor Bull. Mr. Tyler, is that okay? Do we need to go to a secret ballot in that case?
Thank you, Chair. No, as there is now only one nomination and second on the table, if the committee's not in objection, then that will go through. Thank you.
Thank you. In that case, I welcome Councillor McCormack as Vice Chairman to the board.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Tyler, do I need to now adjourn slightly while I speak with Mrs. Barrable, or shall we carry on with the rest of the agenda?
Chairman, that is your decision, but I know that my colleague in legal would prefer to have a conversation with yourself just to brief you on today's agenda.
Okay, in that case, I'll just adjourn for a couple of minutes while we do that. Thank you, members. Thank you, members, and welcome back to this morning's planning board meeting. We will now move back onto the main part of the agenda, and I will firstly ask Mr. Tyler for any apologies.
Thank you, Chairman. So yes, we have received one apology from Councillor Norman Decent, and with that, item 4, substitute members, we have Councillor Judy Butt, who is substituting for Councillor Decent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Tyler, and welcome along to Councillor Butt. Do we have any declarations of interest from any members on any of today's items, please? Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, Chairman. It's regarding agenda item 8A, Royal Bournemouth Hospital. I'm the BCP appointed governor on the RBCH Trust, so I will not be participating in the debate, but I will be making a statement as a BCP councillor. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hilliard. I understand the situation there. Councillor Stribley.
Sorry, Chairman. Thank you. My interest is non-pecuniary. It is the same item 8A. I have been a governor of Poole General Hospital, for 9 years. The normal term is 6, I'm afraid. My term was due to end at the end of June, but I've been asked to stay on until the full merger, unfortunately delayed, happens in October. I have not been party to any of the plans. I've had no discussions with the plans, with anybody at all. So I am prepared and believe I should take part in the debate. My only interest in the hospital is as of any other resident in the area, or indeed any visitor too, who might need to use its facilities at some time. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stribley. I think you are correct in that you are able to take part in this application discussions today. Thank you for that. Are there any further declarations of interest, please? Okay, moving on. Confirmation of minutes. Do we agree to the signing of the minutes for the meeting held on the 2nd of July 2020?
Yes. Agreed.
Chairman, if I may, Joe Tyler, Democratic Services here. It was just to alert yourself and the committee that there is actually an error in minute number 186, which, with the committee's approval, I will correct. It's just to correct the ward reference number and the description in that minute. So if the committee are in agreement, then I will correct that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tyler. I'm sure that the committee will agree to that one. So moving on, we have public issues, and that is that after the officer presentation on each individual application, I will refer to democratic officers to read out any written statements before we hear from any ward councillors who wish to speak. Before we go into this morning's first agenda item, which is item 8A, I do need to make a small announcement to board members, and that is regarding the item at 8C. We have been informed of a late consideration coming into this, and in my opinion, and in agreement with the previous chairman, who was also in agreement with this, and I thank him for this, we will need to defer this item due to a late representation that raises a matter that needs to be considered by the legal department. In order to correctly advise planning officers, this matter will need to be adjourned without debate. I therefore ask you for your cooperation in this and vote to adjourn this item. Do members agree to that, please?
Agreed.
Sorry, Chairman, can I just interrupt and just clarify something before you get the entire vote?
Yes, please, Mr. Barrable.
Sorry about that. At the beginning of what you said, I know you referred to a deferral.
Yes.
And then it's changed slightly because the two comments after that were adjournment. Just for clarity, can we just make sure that it is a deferral? It's not going to be heard at all. Thank you.
Sorry. My fault, Mr. Barrable. It is a deferral we are going for, ladies and gentlemen. Is that still agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you.
Chair, just on that one, as there's been no dissent from that and no objections in the comments box, then we'll take that as a unanimous deferral. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So moving on then, this morning, the first schedule that we have is item 8A, which is the Royal Bournemouth Hospital, Castle Lane East. I will ask Peter Burridge, who is the presenting officer, to prepare himself for that one.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Burridge. Would you like to present?
Yes, please. Can I just ask people to confirm that they can see this, see the screen?
Not at the moment, Mr. Burridge. We cannot see it. Oh, it has now appeared.
You should be able to see a title page. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you very much. The application relates to the Royal Bournemouth Hospital on the north-east side of Castle Lane East and with the A338 Wessex Way running to the north. Vehicular access to the hospital is via Deansley Road to the south, which also leads to Wessex Way, to the Wessex Way site to the rear of the hospital. The application site measures some 16.5 hectares and includes part of the Wessex Field site to the rear. The application is in outline form with all matters reserved. The application seeks planning permission for the phased construction of new buildings and structures to accommodate a women's, children's and emergency care centre in front of the existing buildings comprising the Emergency Arrivals and Assessment Centre, a new main entrance incorporating ancillary retail facilities, a multi-storey car park, new hospital buildings identified as a new pathology laboratory and nursing home, a new substation / energy centre, and also allows for new / realigned roads, footpaths and cycle paths. The proposal would also necessitate the demolition of some existing buildings on the application site. The planning application has been submitted further to the clinical services review undertaken for the whole of Dorset Health Services provision, which established that development of this hospital will involve creating an emergency hospital at Bournemouth and a major planned hospital at Poole. The hospital merger is not the subject of this planning application, which instead relates to the planning merits of the development proposed for this site. Looking now at an aerial view of the hospital, we can see that the hospital is clearly identified by the blue roof buildings at the centre of the site, opposite the Little Down Sports Centre and with Townsend to the north. This aerial view is directly above the hospital. Again, the hospital was identified by the blue roof buildings and the lake at the centre of the site, which forms an important landscape feature to the benefit of staff, visitors and patients. This slide is taken from the planning application and shows the existing and surrounding uses. The blue roofed east and west wings form the main part of the existing complex. These two slides show 3D views of the existing hospital, views from the front and towards the rear. It is noted that the existing hospital site is characterised predominantly by 2- and 3-storey buildings which cover the majority of the site, with the exception of its lake, the service roads and the car parking. These two slides show the main vehicular entrance to the hospital via Castle Lane East and Deansley Road. It would be noted that the existing buildings are not prominent in public views and are well screened by a raised bund and the associated tree planting along the Castle Lane East frontage. These three slides show the main vehicular access to the site, to the rear of the bus hub, and two views along Deansley Road. Additionally, these pictures show buildings on the opposite side of Deansdy Road for a comparison of height, which include the 6-storey Village Hotel, which can be seen on the left of the screen. Finally, these slides show views to the hospital from the Wessex Way and Castle Lane East. It is important to note that the hospital is well screened by trees, all of which are protected. So this view is from Wessex Way, and this view is looking directly towards the hospital from Castle Lane East. Turning attention to the development proposed, this comprises the site parameter plan, which forms the basis of this outline planning application. There are 5 areas which are identified for development. Looking at the illustrative site plan, we can see these areas. Area 1 being at the bottom of the screen, and that comprises the site for the new main hospital entrance and the associated Women's, Children's and Emergency Care Centre, and Area 2 alongside, which is for the Energy Centre. Area 3 at the rear of the site is for the proposed pathology lab or hospital building. Area 4 at the top of the screen is the area intended for the multi-storey car park, and then just below that, Area 5 is the site proposed for the care home. This plan shows an illustrative site layout plan without the purple hashing. It is important to note that this is just illustrative. It is important to note the original parameter plan that was submitted with the application. This highlights the 6 areas for development which were originally proposed for development and included the surface level car parks towards the front of the site, identified as Area 2, and the surface level car parks and associated tree screening areas to the Wessex Way side, identified as Area 6. Significantly, development in these areas would have resulted in a substantial tree loss in part of the site covered by a woodland tree preservation order. Officers have negotiated extensively on this planning application and have achieved significant improvements which will help to avoid significant tree loss, significantly reduce the number of new car parking spaces proposed, and also allow for significant improvements to the design of the proposals and visual amenity, and further significant improvements to the hospital environment both internally and externally. Just to note on this slide as well, in Area 2 a multi-storey car park was originally proposed in front of the main hospital building. This area shows the proposed phasing, which is only for illustrative purposes only and hasn't been fully agreed, but it does give an idea of a possible way forward with the development and highlights that the development wouldn't all be built at the same time. So if we look at the areas in detail, areas 1 and 2 at the front of the site, this comprises the main entrance and associated building and the energy centre. This slide shows the aerial view of what is there currently, which predominantly comprises the surface level car park at the front of the site, and the building would be approximately where that roundabout is coming forward at that position. Indicative images shown by the planning application, but as I say, these are only indicative and would be agreed at the reserved matters stage. It is, however, apparent that the building would be considerably taller than existing buildings on the hospital site and would therefore be far more prominent in public views. This 3D aerial image gives quite a good idea as to the sort of the massing and the scale of how the development could look. This slide here provides an illustrative site section drawing, giving an idea as to the height proposed for the building, which would be agreed as part of the parameters for this development. And this slide shows an indicative floor layout. The application has been fully formulated in conjunction with the hospital and clinical employees, which has largely dictated the internal layout of the development, in addition to the existing site layout. Officers have worked hard to ensure that the amount of development proposed could be accommodated on the site, whilst at the same time providing the necessary service roads, improvements to the pedestrian and cycle network, and ensuring the retention of the earth bund at the front of the site with its associated protected trees. This slide shows indicative details regarding the realigned road, pedestrian areas including the two plazas either side of the entrance building, and the main and the proposed cycle links which would run around the perimeter of the building. This slide shows the existing emergency access into the hospital from Castle Lane East that is proposed for improvement as part of this application. This slide shows land which has been identified for dedication to the council along Deansley Road to facilitate and improve cycle links, which will be secured by a Section 106 agreement as part of this planning application. Finally, this plan shows the necessary tree protection measures to the earth bunds that would be safeguarded and maintained and enhanced as part of the development which is proposed. Members will see that the purple indicative outline of the proposal is shown on that plan. If you can see my cursor, there's a line sort of here which gives an idea as to where the building might extend to. Moving to Area 3, which is the area at the rear of the site on land currently forming part of the Wessex Field site. This is identified for a new hospital building, which would likely form the pathology building. This view shows an aerial view of the site as it is currently. And this plan shows the tree protection measures, which again officers have worked extensively to ensure that trees would not be significantly harmed as part of this development. Moving to areas 4 and 5, this is towards the rear of the site. This area is for the multi-storey car park and the care home. This slide shows the existing site layout for area 4, where the multi-storey car park would stand, and that will be alongside the existing multi-storey car park, replacing those buildings which you can see to the east. And the car park in front, the surface level car park, which would be the site of the new hospital building, identified as a new care home. Again, this slide here shows the necessary tree protection measures which the council have achieved to ensure that the amount of development which is proposed could be accommodated on the site without causing significant harm to the trees on site. This application is presented to the Planning Committee with a recommendation for approval. In this regard, officers are happy that the scheme as amended, subject to the Section 106 heads of terms outlined and the planning condition details, would accord with the provisions of the development plan and the MPPF and provide significant benefits which would outweigh the more limited harm that would result. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Burridge. Members, given the scale and significance of the application before us, I have agreed as Chair to increase the numbers of public statements to 3 for either side and to allow BCP councillors to speak. I will now ask Mr. Tyler, the Democratic Officer, to read out the written statements that have been received. But before we do that, I would like to ask Ms. Barrable to speak, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Trying to start the video. Thank you, Chairman, for that. Just wish to say that I understand that there's a lot of issues raised with regard to the hospital, and I just wanted to focus members' minds before we get to the point of hearing any of the deputations that, as you members are fully aware, they can only consider this matter on material planning grounds, and so it would be inappropriate for them to start debating the merits, for example, of whether the hospital in Poole should have certain facilities or certain facilities should be closed. We are purely looking at this on its planning merits, and I do believe that in some of the deputations there will be things and matters that are not planning considerations, and I just wanted to advise members before they heard them that those particular matters should be excluded from their memory, well, from their mind when they're actually considering the application, whether it's acceptable or not. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Barrell. Appreciate that advice. Mr. Tyler, would you like to read out the written statements, please?
Yes, certainly, Chair. Thank you. So, to confirm, we have received 3 statements in objection, 3 in support, and there are 5 BCP councillors that have requested to speak. So, starting with the letters in objection, the first one is from a local resident called Sue Aikenhead, and I will now read out her statement as written. Please can the committee consider the over 1 million extra and longer journeys across the conurbation that the plans will necessitate, causing risk to life, increase in lives lived in disability, and making traffic congestion in the chronically congested conurbation even worse. The associated increased carbon emissions affecting health and the environment, despite BCP's climate emergency declaration and pledge to move to carbon neutrality. The loss of the promised spur road to enable access to the hospital, particularly for residents living west of the Royal Bournemouth Hospital. Joint health scrutiny in August 2019 noted the plans to expand Royal Bournemouth Hospital relied on the new road. Unless the committee is satisfied that agreeing the hospital planning application will not cause 1 million extra journeys across the chronically congested conurbation, plans to relocate A&E, maternity and paediatrics at the Royal Bournemouth Hospital are safe. Plans to reduce the number of A&E and maternity locations and to increase the level of emergency service delivery at Royal Bournemouth Hospital to meet the needs of 750,000 people are appropriate and achievable without the spur road. Residents ask the committee to reject the application. And then there is a section on traffic congestion journey calculations. Under the plans, Poole will see all planned ops and outpatients and Royal Bournemouth Hospital all emergency admissions. The plans mean 38,500 emergency admissions currently seen at Poole from the west will have to cross the conurbation to get to the Royal Bournemouth Hospital. Emergency admissions will not use public transport and will not drive themselves. Drivers will have to cross the conurbation twice to drop patients off and twice to pick them up when they come home. That is 4 journeys. The average stay for an emergency admission at Poole is 4 days, so these patients will also generate perhaps 8 visitors across the conurbation. That is 1 visitor per day, 2 journeys across the conurbation per visitor. The total approximate is 450,000 extra journeys. 72,000 planned operation patients from the east will have to cross the conurbation to get to Poole. Again, these patients will not drive themselves. That will be 4 journeys per patient. They are largely day patients, but with some longer stays, which will also generate visitors, say approximately 320,000 extra journeys. Around 500,000 outpatients currently seen at the Royal Bournemouth Hospital will have to cross the conurbation to get to Poole. 2 journeys per patient. Some will come on public transport, but most won't, as a lot of the care is taken by older patients and those with long-term conditions. That equals, say, 800,000 extra journeys. Total anticipated extra journeys, 1.5 million. That is the end of Sue Aikenhead's statement. The second statement of objection comes from Sarah Ward, who is the co-founder of Poole's COVID-19 Community Support Group. So, Please can the committee consider that the Royal Bournemouth Hospital expansion plans were submitted to planning before Dorset NHS knew about COVID-19. The plans mean the end of emergency admissions at Poole, the closure of Poole Maternity, the relocation of Poole Paediatrics, the net loss of 245 acute beds, the loss of community hospitals and or beds at Ferndown, Wareham, Portland, West Haven and Alderney, all 48 physical healthcare beds to be closed. Do these plans really not need any revision in light of the lessons learned? This section is on what COVID-19 has taught us. Infection control. There is no substitute for having COVID-19 emergency and maternity admissions to a different site to non-COVID-19 A&E and maternity admissions. The chair of the Health Select Committee, Jeremy Hunt, told Parliament in June that 25% of COVID-19 infections had been contracted in hospital. Lack of acute beds. Dorset CCG decision-making business case shows a net reduction of 245 acute beds under the plans, largely due to the planned closure of 407 beds at Poole Hospital. The lack of acute beds for COVID-19 patients during the first wave meant that 1. There were cancellation of all planned operations, and 2. Rapid discharge, untested, of 270 Dorset patients from hospital into care homes between mid-March and mid-April. At the 29th of May, ONS statistics showed that there had been more COVID-19 deaths in Dorset care homes at 157 than in hospital, 154. There were also 18 deaths at home. The lack of critical care beds. The plans say that there will be just 30 critical care beds for the conurbation catchment population. Just looking at critical illness due to COVID-19, 329 people had died of COVID-19 in Dorset by the 29th of May, according to the ONS. Of these, who are hospitalised, approximately 2/3 recover. Therefore, the deaths represent only about 1/3 of those who needed critical care. How can the needs of perhaps 1,000 Dorset patients be met by 30 critical care beds? A rise in patients needing hospitalisation with COVID-19 and often lengthy rehabilitation post-infection, which rural patients would prefer to access in community hospital beds close to home. Will residents be able to visit loved ones who are rehabilitating post-COVID-19 at the Royal Bournemouth Hospital? Will they be separate from those coming in with new infections? How will they get there if they do not have access to a car, given the poor or no transport from rural areas? How much will taxis cost? Unless the committee believes the plans fully address the above issues, and as the parent of 2 high-risk children, I ask the committee to reject the plans or postpone consent until these matters are addressed. That is the end of the statement from Sarah Ward. And finally, the third statement in objection is from a local resident, Siobhan Coleman, and her statement is as follows. I wish to object to the plan which outline changes to structures at Royal Bournemouth Hospital on the grounds that the level of increased traffic going onto the site will be detrimental to residents, staff, patients and local employers and employees who have a large number of large businesses and sites in the area. This includes JP Morgan, Tesco's and the courts, as well as patients and staff at the hospital. The attempts to alleviate matters by providing 400 parking spaces, footpaths, road layout and cycle lanes will not be sufficient when one considers the level of congestion in the area prior to the expansion of services at the hospital. The lack of joined-up transport plans in Dorset mean that patients are forced to travel by car. There is no access by rail, and post-COVID-19, people do not feel safe to use public transport and the shared car service. Putting clinical consultation online or by phone may work for a younger population, but given the age profile of Dorset residents, I believe that this arrangement will deny many access to healthcare provision. It is vital that post-COVID-19, planning considers the risks of placing one A&E in one hospital without considering the resilience of this strategy at a time when the NHS could be shut down if there was a coronavirus infection outbreak and patients needed to be diverted to another hospital while a deep clean was undertaken and or testing of all staff was deemed necessary. This has already happened to Hillingdon and also at Weston-super-Mare. Please address these issues. That is the end of Siobhan Coleman's statement and the last statement in objection. So now, Chairman, I will move on to the statements in support of the application, and just while I'm loading up the document, I wonder if Peter Burridge, the planning officer, could bring the slides that were submitted by those speaking in support for members and the audience to see. Thank you.
Can you see those? Chair, can you see that image on the screen?
Yeah, we can now. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So, Chair and members, again, we have 3 statements in support of the application, and I will now read out the first one, which was received by Dr. Eric Fisher. I am an elected public governor and hospital volunteer and a member of the public engagement group with Dorset CCG. I've spoken with many hundreds of patients and their carers on their experiences. I have lived in East Dorset for 24 years and depend upon high quality health services, having used local hospitals as a patient. I understand that over 10,000 hours of doctor, nurse and other NHS staff time, public consultation and a year of technical discussion with officers have gone into ensuring a high quality proposal. This has succeeded in balancing many issues to get a proposal that delivers real improvements in the quality of hospital care for our population. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. Over £250 million of investment in the NHS is available for both Bournemouth and Poole hospitals because of the strength of the plan it is based upon. This will enhance and modernise hospital provision to meet the increasingly complex needs of an ageing population. It will also attract, retain and make best use of staff. It makes our NHS more sustainable in the longer term within limited resources. There will also be a big boost to the local economy and jobs if we get this funding into Dorset. The plan and illustrations of the buildings are being shared on screen to help bring to life the proposal for the committee. These come from the published document, which is called the Future, Our Vision for the Future Dorset NHS. The patient benefits are significant. A new maternity unit, something that's been required since the 1990s. A new children's unit on the main hospital site. Critical care, expanded and state-of-the-art. Emergency department with 24-hour walk-in service provided, service retained at Poole. Pathology services for better diagnosis and treatment decisions, including for COVID-19. 443 extra parking spaces. Increased consultant cover around the clock. The application was made in June 2019, and I understand that the Trust has continued to engage extensively with BCP Council to ensure that it meets, and if possible exceeds, the necessary high standards, especially in regard to the Green Travel Plan, and achieve an excellent rating for environmental sustainability. Also, this has sought to ensure the overall layout and look of the proposed development. This has sought to ensure the overall layout and look of the proposed development is appealing. The officer recommendation to approve is very welcome. Furthermore, lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic have been incorporated into the designs to enable greater resilience in the event of further major incidents. I am very hopeful that you will be able to grant the planning application and unlock the much needed investment in our local NHS. That's the end of the statement from Dr. Eric Fisher. The second statement in support is from Dr. Forbes Watson, who is a member of Dorset CCG. I am a Dorset GP and chair of the Dorset NHS Clinical Commissioning Group. Over 5 years has been spent developing the best clinical strategy to meet the health needs of our local population, to save lives and improve health. This is across GPs, mental health, community and hospital care. That process included intense engagement and scrutiny from the public, health experts, judicial review and Secretary of State, and has been completed. The government is prepared to back the investment, but will only back this plan. A decision must be made today. Over £250 million of investment into Dorset's NHS can be unlocked today, as all of the fundamental criteria required by the Treasury are met except one, having an outline planning approval. This funding is for both Paul Hospital and the Royal Bournemouth Hospital and is part of a well-tested, evidence-based plan. These changes are a positive move in providing superior health service for local people. I have read recently various commentators saying expansion of the hospital will cause increased congestion in the conurbation, when in fact the hospital is responding to the increased demands being placed upon it by the growing and ageing population. To imply the hospital is driving the increase in congestion is simply a misplaced notion. Failure to respond to an increasing population would mean that services would soon struggle. There has not been a sizable increase in hospitals locally since the early 1990s. Ultimately, this is a planning application to increase the size of the hospital and the services that it can provide. The fact is, the NHS is working to reduce congestion, improve air quality, and cut carbon. The travel plan changes to reduce congestion include more bike facilities and bike lanes, a hospital bus service, high patient volume services, for example, blood tests and day surgery, as well as office hour support functions moving off-site, online and phone consultations, so no need to visit the hospital at all, staff working from home, with COVID helping speed these plans up, more 7 AM to 7 PM shifts for staff working in the 24/7 services moving on site, so less staff travel during rush hours. If the Spur Road junction completes, then this will be an extra benefit above these measures in reducing congestion. The hospital's buildings will be BREEAM Excellent, that's BREEAM, higher than the council's environmental requirement. The Royal Bournemouth and Christchurch hospitals has bettered its carbon reduction targets and has a green flag for how it nurtures its local natural resources. Now is the time to support our local NHS, unlock investment and reduce congestion and carbon. I am confident, if approved, these changes will stand the local NHS in good stead for a vastly improved health service. That is the end of Dr. Forbes Watson's statement. And if you beg my pardon, I'm just going to have a sip of water before reading the third one. So the third statement has come in from Mr. Richard Renault and is focusing on the planning report. Paragraphs 36 to 50 make clear there are no objections from the numerous expert agencies, both internal and external to the council. The planning officer analysis makes it clear that there is no significant conflict, indeed no material conflict at all, with the adopted development plan. The proposal represents sustainable development, the National Planning Policy Framework. There are no material considerations that would dictate the application should be determined other than in accordance with the development plan, noting section 38(6) of the Planning Act. The conditions and further information for this outline application will be met and updated as the detail of the scheme is developed. The choice today is the principle. Does expanding the hospital have any planning reason that could sustain an objection or delay the process? Based on the report and the law, we can see no grounds to sustain an objection. Following more than 12 months of work, listening carefully to initial objections and expert opinions on the original proposal has changed relocating new parking to the rear of the site, following Highways advice reducing additional parking spaces from 1,000 to 443, providing land for a new cycle lane, improving pedestrian and cycle access into the site from Castle Lane East, retaining all but a small number of TPO trees on site, and 2-for-1 replacement planting, no fettering future options for Wessex Fields. One clarification to the report, the vehicle movements per day would be reduced by 184 because of our travel plan initiatives. The hospital isn't a developer who leaves town after something is built. We have to ensure our travel plans work now and long term. We have a track record for investing and supporting non-car alternatives. This includes making tough choices, such as charging staff to park, restricting staff parking permits, discounting bus passes, and investing heavily in cycle and changing facilities. This is because it is critical to our patients, visitors and staff to get travel to hospital right. The council limits the number of parking spaces, so we constantly adjust our measures to live within this overall number. We will do the same after the site changes and invest over 1.5 million in improvements. There is support from across the NHS for the proposal, including ambulance service, Paul Hospital, local, regional and national health bodies. There is consensus this proposal will be far better than carrying on as we are. This proposal means we can give the best services with the staff and funds available, be future-proofed, and thus save and improve more lives. The recommendation is for approval. Agreeing the principle the hospital can expand will benefit the NHS and the public for years to come. And thank you very much. That's the end of the third statement. And I'd just like to clarify that statement came in from Richard Renault and Tim Goodson, who is chair of the Dorset CCG, or chief executive of the Dorset CCG, I should say. Thank you, Chairman. That concludes the public statements for this item.
Thank you, Mr. Tyler. We will now move on to ward councillors. We have 5 who have requested to speak, including one written statement that will be read out by Mr. Tyler. Mr. Tyler, would you like to read the first written statement now so that you can then give your voice a rest?
Certainly, Chairman. Thank you very much. This written statement is a short statement from Councillor Mike Cox, and I will just open it up to read out. So Councillor Mike Cox is Ward Councillor for Christchurch Town Ward, and his statement is as follows. Dear Planning, unfortunately I will be unable to attend this meeting. I therefore write in support of the above planning application. On balance, this development should be welcome. Whilst there may be elements which I would prefer to be done slightly differently, I accept they will never be able to please everyone, and the benefits it brings will be substantial, and in some aspects, well overdue. I would therefore like you to note my approval for this development. Thank you, Chairman. That's the end of Councillor Cox's statement.
Thank you, Mr. Tyler. Councillor Williams, you are the ward councillor for this area. I will come to you first for you to do your statement. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chairman, and congratulations on your appointment. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I am speaking for both Councillor Dove and myself. It's been some time since we had the need to speak with the Planning Board. In fact, the last time was for the application for Wessex Fields, when I was permitted to plead the case for a road through past the hospital and onto Castle Lane. This was opposed at the time by the so-called Friends of Riverside, who I understand a group of residents in Holdenhurst Village, who didn't want to be part of the scheme or have part of the scheme. We also heard from several hospital staff members who were carefully pleading for this road to be built, and I guess they still do. What does this have to do with the application before you today? Well, quite a bit in our opinion. We're supportive of the scheme and before the scheme before you. As ward councillors, we must protest strongly regarding the road going nowhere. The road, phase 1 and 2, is essential for access to the hospital and to move away from the gridlock at Deaney Road, which affects both hospital visitors and residents alike. Our plea for you, the Planning Board, is to please look carefully at the travel plan. This is the opportunity to do the right thing. But note the road stops at the car park at the end of the development, and if this goes ahead as proposed, it makes it very difficult and expensive to make good in the future. Our residents largely want this, and we proved that with hundreds of signatures at the time of the last planning. Please reconsider.
Excuse me, Councillor Williams.
As I said earlier, in favour of this scheme going ahead, and thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt you. Members are finding it very difficult to actually hear you speaking. I wonder if you could turn up the volume on your system or speak closer to the microphone, please.
Yeah, I'll try and talk closer to the microphone. So I read the whole thing again?
No, carry on from where you were.
Well, I was just finishing actually. I'll repeat the last paragraph. This is the opportunity to do the right thing. The road stops at the car park at the end of the development, and if that goes ahead as proposed, it will make it very difficult and expensive to make good in the future. Our residents largely want that, the road that is, and we proved that with hundreds of signatures at the time. Please reconsider. We are, as I said earlier, in favour of the scheme going ahead. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Councillor Farquhar, would you like to speak now, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. Just give me a second to get my document up. Yes, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. It's always a bit odd speaking to the unblinking eye on your computer. Can I congratulate you on your new appointment to the Chair, and I wish you the very best of it. And could I also add my thanks to yours to Simon Bull for his sterling service. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank the senior planning officers for explaining what is relevant in bringing this representation before the committee. So my statement is as follows. If I speak somewhat quickly and you miss some of the detail, it is my understanding that Democratic Services are quite prepared to distribute this statement to examine in your debate. Right, okay. I bring this application before the committee by using the Constitution Part 3, Section 2.2, Subsection C, Item 3. I believe it to be against the private interest. This is the public interest. The DCCG Clinical Service Review equals Poole Hospital to become elective care, the RBH to become emergency care. So constitutionally, it represents a significant impact on a wide number of businesses and or people. That's what's stipulated in the Constitution. The Clinical Services Review means emergency admissions to Poole Hospital will cease. The Poole Annual Report 2018-19 reports 72,000 A&E attendees and 38,600 emergency admissions from that. Poole Maternity will close. Poole Maternity has approximately 4,500 births per year. Poole Paediatrics will relocate to RBH, RBH being the Royal Bournemouth Hospital. Poole Oncology, Cancer admissions will be relocated to RBH. Some elective work from RBH will transfer to Poole. In 2019, there were 72,000 elective procedures, 85% of which were day cases. The material concern is traffic increase and congestion, and its impact on critical journey times and public safety. As noted, a climate and ecological emergency has been declared since this application was submitted. Paragraph 108 of the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework, for those listening, states, in assessing specific applications for development, it should be ensured that any significant impacts from the development on the transport network, open brackets, in terms of capacity and congestion, close brackets, can be cost effectively mitigated to an acceptable degree. It is clear this application will have a significant impact on the transport network, and I can see no evidence that it has been cost effectively mitigated. BCP Council posted an announcement on the 17th of July of this year that our conurbation is the 4th most congested city region in England and the 69th in the world. Having studied the transport assessment and the travel plan submitted, the current congestion across the traffic network has not been acknowledged. RBH has ambitions to get staff cycling, walking and car sharing. However, this cannot mitigate the impact of having 900 more staff, a 20% increase on site. Both documents also fail to adequately address the substantial use of new patient and visitor journeys. In the transport assessment, the proposed monitoring and assessment intervals are too long, and its baseline survey is too small to be accurate for current or future modal shift, and thus it is not sustainable. The transport assessment itself admits that in two 2018 staff surveys, the sample size of just 4% and 10% were too low to be representative. a slightly larger sample in 2019 of patients, visitors and staff showed that 81% of patients travelled by car, with only 9% arriving by public transport. A similar 78% of visitors and 63% of the staff used a private car. However, for the 38,600 emergency admissions transferring from pool to RBH, almost 100% will come by car or ambulance. Emergency medical and trauma patients and mums-to-be cannot take the bus. In the case of the 72,000 A&E attendees at pool, the Royal College of Emergency Medicine found that only 15% of A&E attendees did not need, excuse me, I've got a message which has popped up, did not need A&E level assessment or care. This means that 85% of the pool A&E attendees, 61,000, would also need to travel to RBH. These would be the more unwell patients who cannot be treated at the urgent care centre at pool. It is likely that these patients will come by car. Note, more than half pool's emergency admissions, 19,500, are not included in the A&E attendee statistics, as they are referred by GPs and not through the A&E. This means that 80,000 new patients attending RBH, 38,600 emergency admissions plus 42,000 A&E attendees equals 160,000 new patient journeys to and from RBH. Inpatients generate visitors. Pool reports the average length of stay for emergency admissions is 4 days. Using the statistic from the survey of 78% of visitors using cars, that is over 30,000 extra car journeys for each visit. A visit each day for 4 days means 120,000 additional car journeys, and that equals 240,000 new visitor journeys to and from RBH. These additional 400,000 patient and visitor journeys will not be offset by the move of elective patients to pool. The travel assessment makes clear that not all elective work will go to pool. Assuming that all day cases will go, this is 61,000 less journeys to and from RBH. However, not all day case patients will travel by car. If 81% of day care patients travel by car, we're looking at a reduction of 50,000 journeys to and from RBH, so 100,000 journeys in all. This application was submitted prior to COVID-19 and a huge reduction in the use of public transport. Paragraph 109 of the NPPF states, development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact to highway safety or the residual cumulative impacts to the road network would be severe. The transport assessment provided assumes that a reduction of the number of elective day care patients at RBH means that the impact of the application would not be severe, and therefore mitigation is not needed. But nothing in the RBH travel plan or the transport assessment has suggested any significant mitigations for the impact of the new patient and visitor journeys. So therefore, it is 300,000 additional journeys back and forth to the RBH net. As detailed above, this application will cause more, not less, staff, patient and visitor traffic. It will cause more congestion on the traffic network between the hospitals, with emergency patients from the west, plus visitors travelling to RBH, and elective patients from the east needing to travel to pool. Therefore, I suggest that the committee refuse this application due to the significant impact from the development on the traffic network. That cannot be cost effectively mitigated, NPPF paragraph 108, resulting in a severe residual cumulative impact on the road network. Thank you very much, Chair, and I appreciate if the statement could be distributed if needed for your debate.
Councillor Rice.
Thank you. I'm just starting my video. Good morning, committee. I tend to like to keep things simple. So I would like to highlight some fundamental inconsistencies for this planning application. The transport assessment by WSP on page 46 suggests that with the current proposals, they expect an additional 58 pedestrian trips per day and an additional 57 daily cycling trips. Now, the NHS chief, Sir Simon Stevens, has called on all staff in the NHS to step up action and tackle the climate and health emergency, and this was on the 25th of January 2020. BCP Council declared a climate emergency back in July 2019. Now, I think I am correct in saying that we are in significantly different times from when this application was first being thought about and the years that have passed during the application. Everyone knows that we have a climate emergency, and transport is the one sector in the UK that has not made any improvements in reducing its carbon footprint over the last decades. This is in one part because as cars become more efficient, we travel further. A transport assessment that predicts an increase of just 58 walking trips and 57 cycling trips on such a huge development, does that really seem in keeping with sustainable development and sustainable transportation? However, the application does want to build several multi-storey car parks. Now, to be honest, I know it is difficult, and we, in this area of the UK, many of us are reliant on private car, but I haven't heard anyone say that private car counts as sustainable transport. I know that it is hard to think about not being reliant on this car in this area, but your responsibility as people in positions of power is to provide leadership and enable our residents and hospital staff to move around in sustainable transport methods. For me, going back to this simple idea, we really need to rethink transportation around this site and ask officers to come back with an application that thoroughly helps us all to move towards sustainable transportation for future generations. We no longer have the luxury of time to think that it will be sorted out with the next change in the hospital structure or the next application. Yes, this application talks about bus services and cycling improvements. However, you will understand from personal experiences that if you know there is a new large car park at the destination you want to go to, you would think, well, I can just pop in the car to go there. This is called induced demand. The opposite is also true. If you know parking is a nightmare, then you look for alternatives. This application encourages the use of car through the application of wanting to build these multi-storey car parks. So some serious revision needs to be done to help ensure sustainable transport develops for the decades to come. This planning application does not take the leadership role as seriously as is required, given the situation we find ourselves in 2020. If we do not provide leadership, then who will? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. And finally, Councillor Hilliard, please.
Thank you, Chair. As a BCP councillor, I believe that the planning application before us today will ensure that the best possible healthcare continues to be provided to our residents. As the BCP appointed governor for the RBCH Trust, I've been privileged to see close up a review of clinical services across Dorset. Combining services in location gives more resilience and allows for greater specialisation, which is proven to improve patient care, future-proofing provision of care for our expanding population. These plans have been well publicised and consulted on in recent years, and you will note in the report there's no objection from Highways. Whilst it is understood that the hospital operates within one of the most congested conurbations in the area, this is not only due to the hospital traffic along the major road artery. The NHS is leading the way in promoting alternatives to single occupancy car journeys and have produced a comprehensive travel plan where traffic and transport modelling has been undertaken. This shows that hospital traffic during the peak network hours would reduce to some key departments working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, where staff are more spread with shifts across the day, with fewer travelling in the peak hours. A future barrier control connection to the Wessex Way, Wessex Field area will provide a second route for ambulances, delivery vehicles and staff with permits, which again will be beneficial for cutting congestion. Like BCP Council, the NHS has had to work smarter as a result of COVID-19. Some of these new ways of working will heavily reduce the need for staff and patients to travel. The use of greater technology in the recent months has meant that more video consultations have taken place, providing the same level of care, but without the need for patient journeys. This way of working is expected to continue and heavily reduce outpatient appointments. Over 60,000 GP requested blood tests have recently moved back into community settings, again reducing the need for patients to travel to the hospitals. And many supporting roles in the last few months have been working remotely from home, enabling staff to reduce their journeys in the week. I hope that you will support this application to change the healthcare provision for Dorset, which will help facilitate improvements in patient care. It is acknowledged that the development will impact the character of the existing hospital site and surrounding area, and the area is already heavily congested. However, the benefits of the proposal, primarily found in improved healthcare provision, far outweigh these associated harm. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hilliard. Before we move on to members' questions, Councillor Trent, I believe that you wish to make a declaration of interest on this item.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just really to declare that I know one of the individuals that spoke in support of the application through another organisation, but I would like to clarify that I have not discussed the matter with the individual, nor would it predetermine or bias my opinion through knowing this person, but I just thought I need to do this for openness.
I think you're absolutely correct, Councillor Trent, and I thank you for doing that. And yes, I think you are fine to continue in this debate and voting on this item. So thank you very much for that. Members, it is now over to you to speak. Please indicate by typing RTS in the frame, and I will come to you in order. Before we come to the first speaker, Mr. Burridge, is there anything you would like to respond into any of the deputations that you have heard?
Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to clarify that the application as amended only includes provision for one multi-storey car park, which to an extent would offset the parking that would be lost to the front of the site. The original plans which were submitted did identify more than one multi-storey car park, but through discussions that has been reduced. So I'd just like to clarify at that point. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Burridge. I did pick that up in the conversation as well. I was going to ask you about that one. So over to members. Is there anyone who would like to start the debate on this one, please? Councillor Trent.
Yes, I was rather hoping that I wasn't the first one to put an RTS, but I have got some questions on the application. First of all, whether it is appropriate to have a care home on the site, especially next to a multi-storey car park, and bear in mind that there are sites within the conurbation that are earmarked for care home provision, and it seems odd to put a care home on the hospital site. There was reference in the report to a public transport upgrade in 2012. That was before this plan was lodged, and I'm wondering why there's no public transport upgrade, because patients and older visitors would not walk or cycle to the hospital, they would be using public transport or car. That's the questions, and the other one is a comment that, well, in fact, it could be a question. Should this scheme contribute towards a bus and emergency vehicle lane along the entire Castle Lane, Wimborne Road and Ringwood Road up to Holes Bay roundabout to mitigate the transport situation? I don't know whether this is the appropriate time to make a suggestion like that, but I wonder whether that has been considered.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Mr. Burridge.
Thank you, Chairman. On the first point with regards to the care home, this application obviously is an outline form, so the more detailed aspects of the application would be considered at a later date as part of the Reserve Matters application. We have spoken to the applicant about the care home. It was suggested that maybe that element of the application might be deferred, but it is retained in there. But I do think that a satisfactory scheme could be achieved. The care home would be close to the lake as well, so the outlook from the care home would obviously, or could be, towards the lake as opposed to a multi-storey car park, and we're comfortable that a care home in that position on the scale parameters shown could be satisfactorily accommodated on the site in that position. So on that point we are happy. With regard to the transport upgrade, the section 106 heads of terms do relate to a bus service which we'll be looking to introduce between Bournemouth Hospital and Poole Hospital. So that aspect has been considered and would form part of the section 106 and is a fundamental aspect of the application in helping to mitigate the highway impacts that the proposal would generate. In respect of the bus lane, we do have the highway officer available. If the chairman would be happy, then I'd perhaps pass over to him for a comment on that.
Yes, please do.
Thank you. Is Nick available?
Oh, good morning. Yes. Can you hear me, Jem?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Nick.
So the point about additional bus lanes, I mean, there are, as part of this application, wide-scale bus lane improvements across the conurbation weren't considered, but through other schemes, such as the Transforming Cities Fund, there are bus lane improvements. And I think as improving bus lanes and introducing more bus lanes across the conurbation will form part of the council's transport proposals going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Helps. Councillor Trent, are you happy with that?
Well, I'm still wondering whether, because the need for additional bus lanes that could double up as emergency vehicle lanes is increased by this application, if it were built, that maybe there should be a more direct correlation between this application and this scheme and the provision of bus lanes, because the big argument that's being offered by everyone who's worried about the scheme is the transport aspect and the amount of time it might take for emergency vehicles to reach a location. And we all know from experience, and I know as someone who used to take my father to the eye clinic at Bournemouth Hospital, that Castle Lane, for example, can be an absolute nightmare. And this is before the bulk of services are moved. And emergency vehicles, at least if there was a comprehensive bus lane that actually linked up to the west of the conurbation, you would at least have the ability to get emergency vehicles through. So it's just really sort of suggesting that that ought to be included in any detailed application.
Thank you for that, Councillor Trent. I'm sure that Mr. Burridge has heard those comments. Councillor Bartlett. Councillor Bartlett. I will come back to.
Sorry, Chair. I had a problem there with my screen.
No problem.
Can you hear me now?
I can, Councillor Bartlett. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd just like to ask Mr. Burridge a question. Something he mentioned earlier on about pre-application planning, where they negotiated a reduction in the car parking, and this was deemed to have been an improvement. Did I get that right?
Mr. Burridge?
Yes, I would just refer back to the presentation. Can you see the screen, Chairman?
Yes, we can, Mr. Burridge. Thank you.
So this was the original parameters plan that was submitted, and you'll see on that plan there was car parking proposed for area 6, area 2 and area 3. So they originally were proposing 2/3 car parks, which wasn't considered to be acceptable for a number of reasons, including highways. So it has been reduced. You're correct.
Thank you. Could you just expand on why you believe that was unacceptable, or the highways thought that was unacceptable, and that by reducing it would produce a better development?
Well, area 6 was actually unacceptable full stop because of the impact it would have had on the trees. So we weren't happy to support development in that area anyway. In terms of the highways issues, it was because of the ratio of car parking spaces that were going to be provided was too high, and we were looking to reduce the ratio of car parking spaces, and also looked for mitigation to be secured through improvements to the cycle links and the bus service instead.
Could I carry on, please, Chair, for a couple of points?
Please do, Councillor Bartlett.
Yeah, I'd just like to take that little further. In terms of improving the traffic congestion in that area, there must be some evidence that putting in these sustainable travel improvements will actually result in some kind of reduction in the traffic in the area. Now, what I'm focusing on are the improvements made to Castle Lane, where many millions of pounds were spent on introducing a cycle lane, which is very rarely used, has very light usage. So, do you have other evidence to support the case that by introducing the sustainable travel improvements, it will actually reduce the congestion that we currently experience at the site?
Thank you, Chairman. Would you mind if I referred to our highway officer again?
No, please carry on, Mr. Burridge.
Could I just add to that before I answer that? Of course, we need to bear in mind that with regard to cycling and walking, this is influenced hugely by the weather. We don't enjoy the same sort of weather conditions as we do in California, although it's a very nice day today, I accept. But it follows on from Councillor Trent's comments regarding the ability of people, particularly elderly people, to either walk or to cycle. And of course, compounding those issues is the fact that we are subject to the weather that's conditions that we have. So, I'm not personally convinced that the improvements through sustainable travel will actually produce any benefit at all, because even if they're introduced, they may well not be used. So I'd be interested to hear what the Highways Officer's got to say about that.
Okay, yes, thank you, Chairman. So when the proposals were first submitted in pre-application, the proposal was to add an extra 1,000 car parking spaces, and now there will be a proposal as a net increase of 443 car parking spaces. So we see that as a substantial Mr. Burridge has already said, we have a major improvement to bus services. The applicant has proposed a direct bus service to Poole Hospital with a half-hour frequency. And also, following a lot of negotiation, we've secured extensive cycle improvements around the site, particularly adjacent to Deansley Road, but also through the site adjacent to Castle Lane East and up to the western entrances of the hospital. The western entrances where the cancer unit is. So, Councillor Bartlett's question is: Are these improvements going to make any difference? Well, my answer would be yes, they will make a difference, because you put on a half-hourly bus service and you introduce a lot of new cycle lanes, and people will use them. We will get a mode shift by improving facilities for buses and cycling. For instance, the public, when asked what would make you cycle more, the common answer would be more segregated cycle lanes, which is what we're trying to propose now. More cycle lanes where people aren't having to negotiate through traffic. And evidence from this area suggests that when there have been bus improvements, for instance at JP Morgan, they have a mode split of about of over 20% travelling by bus. So where they've introduced new bus services there, they've got over 20% travelling by bus. And we're confident that introducing new cycle facilities will enable and encourage more people to cycle.
Thank you, Mr. Helps. Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you for the answer, but I think in my question I said, have you got any evidence that it will produce some benefit? You know, I think the report is very light on providing convincing evidence that it will produce the kind of reduction in traffic that you're hoping for. It's all very well putting cycleways on and around the site. That's fine, but people have got to get there, and putting an extra bus service in directly from Poole is probably a good thing. But of course, it doesn't reach out to the vast area that the patients and visitors will be coming to the site from across the conurbation. I'll just finish very briefly, Chair, if it's okay. I mean, there are some first-class deputations given just now, and frankly, they're all correct, both for and against. They are all correct, and there are concerns. But the overall issue for me is whether whether the problems that we'll face as a result of this would be outweighed by the huge investment into the National Health Service and for the benefit of patients. And having accepted all the extra problems regarding the road traffic network, etc., I believe that overall there will be a benefit to the community. And I for one wouldn't want to put anything in the way of a £250 million investment into this improvement in National Health Services to our community. But I do believe that there are some real issues with the network, and these need to be addressed more fully than they have been in the report at the moment. They are not adequate. They're far from being able to demonstrate that we will reduce the traffic, and it's got to be addressed when it comes. And I'm assuming that that it will be. When it comes for a detailed planning application, we'll be able to look at those issues again. So I'm putting a marker down here that they've got to be addressed. They've got to be addressed properly. Otherwise, this application will ultimately fail. But in principle, I think we should go ahead with it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. You're absolutely right on this. This is a very detailed application, and it's one that is of great benefit for the entire area, which is why we have allowed people to put in rather longer deputations than they would normally have been allowed to do so. Councillor Stribley, you're next to speak, please.
Right, Chairman, can you hear me?
I can indeed, thank you.
Thank you very much. I was going to offer to speak later, but nobody else had put their name up at the time, so I thought the debate might peter out, which would be a shame. Most of the representations we've heard so far have actually not been relevant to this application. We are looking at the site and the proposed buildings on that site. Just straying slightly, the arguments about number of journeys, etc., have been full of misinformation. Currently, there are thousands of blue light journeys between Bournemouth and Poole, where trauma patients and patients needing the extra care of a major trauma unit are actually taken from Bournemouth to Poole every day. And that is a great amount of the patients that are taken in at Poole. They're not just from Poole Hospital. Both hospitals will continue to have outpatients, but the difference at Poole is if you cut your hand and you can get there yourself, you'll still go to Poole. If you cut your hand off, then you'll be taken to Bournemouth. And you would be blue lighted, and in effect that is the difference. I haven't noticed the residents of Bournemouth and Christchurch and to the east screaming that they haven't had a major trauma unit. And indeed, if you have a serious head injury, you get taken to Southampton. If you have serious burns, you go to Odstock, etc., etc. And I think this vastly improves, and I have to say in initial thoughts I was very concerned about the expansion on this site, but it is the only practical site we have in the conurbation for the major hospital that the conurbation needs and deserves. This site will have its own helipad, in effect putting patients directly into the major trauma unit or within seconds away from it, where at the moment helicopters have to land on Whitecliffe Sports Ground, which has to be cleared and then taken by ambulance to Poole, which is another 5 or 10 minutes, and there are big problems there. So there, for major and immediate trauma, there are great benefits in this application. Plainly, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a number of years, probably 5 at least, if not more, for the first of the buildings to be completed and to move on. The 24/7 consultants will be available on site, which is not possible at either hospital at the moment because of the provision and in effect the lack of demand. The spare road connection, which this council has already squashed, at least for the time being, would have greatly reduced traffic congestion around Castle Lane and the roundabout and would ease future congestion, but that is perhaps to be taken in the future. The applicants only have control over the site that they own, so they can't build bus lanes anywhere else. There was talk about the buildings being quite prominent, or the new proposed buildings. I don't have any problem with that. This isn't squashed into the middle of a residential area. It's on a large open site with commercial developments adjacent and around and opposite, well spaced out. There is a good band of trees, and if some have to be lost, and I don't have a problem with that, they can be replaced because trees don't last forever, and the tree screen that is there now only was put in when the hospital was originally built, and look how good it looks now. So one can always improve the tree screen, and if it has to be lost temporarily in any point for a time, because of the major benefit to the conurbation, to the residents, I think that can be taken. A number of us have been very grateful for service of the NHS. I've been in both Poole and Bournemouth hospitals for treatment, more times than I would care to mention. But one is simply grateful for them being there. I know the officers have worked very hard on this. I'm very disappointed that they have reduced the car parking provision by 60%. To me, that is a total nonsense. Of course, a lot of staff may go on their bicycles, certainly when the weather is fair. A few patients might go on their bicycles or walk or take the bus. The bus service, proposed bus service directly between Bournemouth and Poole, I think is really good, certainly if it has only 1 or 2 strategic stops on the way. That will be of great benefit. But if you're a patient and you have something wrong and you don't feel well, you're not going to get on your bike to ride to Bournemouth and back from anywhere other than being in the relative vicinity of it. You certainly wouldn't be doing it from Broadstone or Parkstone or further afield. So I think a bus service might be useful, could be, but I don't think that also has very much to do with this application. I don't think the height of the buildings is a problem, and I think people will be pleased to see that there is a huge new modern improving facility for the healthcare for everyone right across the conurbation. I agree with Councillor Hilliard's comments on the application. I think it's in the council, in the borough's interest, in the whole community interest, that we go ahead. I did explain earlier that I have been a Poole hospital governor for 9 years. And when the proposals to merge the hospitals first came, I was my instinct was to be against it. But gradually learning of the huge improvements to the health service for the people of the conurbation and further afield, I have to say that now I support it in principle, and I see nothing on these plans that would deter me in that respect. Sorry, I've just lost my track on that one. I can't see any objections in planning terms. I'm only disappointed that the officers have felt it obliged to think that they knew better than the Quality and Care Commission and both hospitals themselves, which actually will become one, should already have happened, but now will, I think, be the 1st of October, and it will be the East Dorset University Hospital that we will be looking at, with sites in Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch. So I wish it well, and I see no detail in any of the building proposals that one could object to. I am a little concerned about the fewer parking spaces that are now provided or now will be provided than were originally suggested. But I suspect in future we might have that come back. And I am very disappointed that the site to the front and the east, I've forgotten the number temporarily, was ruled out by the officers because of trees, because, as I say, that could certainly have a replant and within a very few years look as good, or if not better, than the existing boundaries to the site. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Stribley. Councillor Lepoviden.
Thank you, Chair. I'm always a little bit worried when officers come to present plans to us and say that they've negotiated improvements, which always seems to have the implication, well, it's not as bad as it was, but not necessarily it's good enough. So this is always my question, is this good enough? if the plans put before us today had been brought to the planning officers in the first place, would they have welcomed them, or would they have found things that needed improvement on these? I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe they can answer for it. To me, they look acceptable. Heights of buildings, hospitals nowadays tend to be very tall. They're well screened, well spread out, not overlooking housing to be in any way objectionable. I share Councillor Trent's concern that maybe the care home in the middle there by a multi-storey car park may not be appropriate, but these are only outline plans and possibly could change. So, as I say, my real thought is, if this plan had been presented to officers in the planning department in the first place, would they have said, brilliant, we can't do better? I don't know.
Thank you, Councillor Biden. Mr. Burridge, would you like to comment on that, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say, yes, the plans as submitted are acceptable and they are put forward to the Planning Committee with a recommendation for approval. The purpose of showing the original plans was to show the story of the application and the improvements we had made. As submitted originally, the plans weren't acceptable and would have carried a recommendation for refusal. So it's just to show the story of the application, and as put before you today, the plans are considered to be acceptable.
Thank you, Mr. Burridge. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, several comments. I'll cut them down because many have been made, but I will pick up on the parking and the bus service comments and the evidence. I think this scheme is quite unique and we don't know what will happen. There's been a lot of quotes about figures, movements between the hospitals, how people may or may not act. I don't think we can prejudge that. However, I do feel that we need to give further, or there will need to be further thought on the traffic impact and also on parking, as I believe the substantial reduction in parking will prove to be a retrograde step. I'd also say that the benefits of an improved RBH is outweighed by the trees, which can be replaced elsewhere, and I do feel concerned that the parking reduction was given. Also, if you are visiting injured or urgently requiring hospital attention, you will take the best route and the best method to get there, regardless of cycle lanes, car parking and buses. They are options, but as we know already with certain cycle lanes, those options that are being put down are proving in some areas to be used infrequently. So I think those areas need to be addressed in any future proposals. In terms of the principle of the development itself, I believe that the development, which has had much thought, is ambitious, but it is right for BCP, and it's, as referred to later, an ageing population. I understand that it will cause some significant disruption during the construction phase, but see no reason other than to support the application at this stage. That's all I've got to add.
Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Bull, please.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at this application, the main concern that we have, or that I have, is the traffic and the transport. We have the Castle Lane that was pre-COVID was busy, lots of traffic pollution, staff complaining they couldn't get out of the hospital. Post-COVID, we're likely to get back to a similar situation with this development on top. I don't know there's enough mitigation, enough transport mitigation to allow that. We could end up with a very tricky situation of a gridlock around the hospital. I know there are measures with the cycle lanes and the bus lanes and the bus from Poole Hospital, but that isn't enough to make a substantial difference to the effect of more people wanting to get to the building. I'm not denying that the building will be of great benefit. We've long needed a better maternity building, the staff are wonderful, but a better building for them to work in has been needed for a number of years. And that's not the argument here. What I'm concerned about is the traffic that will be coming into the area that won't have anywhere to go, and we're going to have gridlock. We're going to have a lot of problems there. I don't agree with Councillor Stribley or Councillor O'Neill on the trees. Trees are not there just to look good. Trees are there to serve a purpose. Trees are there to help us with our air, the quality of our air, and I think that needs to be considered. And I know Mr. Helps, Nick mentioned the Transforming Cities Fund, but that's dealing with the current levels of travel around the conurbation. It's not necessarily taking into consideration the effect of this state-of-the-art building on that side. So that's my consideration there, is what we're really doing about, has enough been done? And I really don't think it has to look at the transport.
Thank you, Councillor Bull. And with regarding the trees, I was pleased to see that any that are lost will be replaced on a 2-for-1 basis. So we will actually be gaining extra trees on there. Like yourself, I think they're extremely valuable for many, many reasons. Vice Chairman, Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted, as I don't have any disagreements with the principle of the application, but having lived in Christchurch my whole life, going west, there's only 2 real ways you can actually get out of the town, and one of those is across Iford Bridge. And at the moment, occasionally at peak times, there is an awful lot of traffic going over that Iford Bridge backing up from Castle Lane. And like the others have said, I'm not going to go too deep into it because I think a lot of it's already been covered. I do have concerns that this development will cause that traffic to build up on a more regular occurrence, even given the mitigation things that have been put forward. And that's all I wanted to say, really.
Thank you, Councillor McCormack. Councillor Butt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, you've been extremely patient with all of us this morning, with some of us straying a little from the application in front of us. I was just reminding myself that we're today looking at the principle of the development, layout and access, and it's very easy to get into the other nitty-gritty. And on that basis, I'm considering this to be the outline submission for permission of demolition of buildings, etc., for hospital facilities, multi-storey car parking, construction of new footpaths, etc., etc. So with all that in mind, I make my comments. My first comment is COVID-19. One of the objectors, I think, made a very salient point. COVID-19 impact is an absolutely unknown risk, and my concern is I came in very late for this meeting, so my abject apologies if I've missed it, Mr. Chairman. But I've read as much as I possibly can, and I can't find anything specific with regard to general provision in light of COVID-19. There's no specific intel report for the committee to consider. Now, whether COVID is likely to impact on development or not, we don't know. It's an absolute unknown. But my concern is there's been no consideration as to whether it will or it won't. It seems to have been absolutely silent. However, if I have missed a part, please could you refer me to that and I will read it. So this unknown risk is a concern. We go back to the point of overdominance, which was raised by a speaker. I think it is quite true that this could be perceived to be as such. The existing hospital is mainly 2-storey and set back well away from the Castle Lane behind the car parks, and well hidden by soft landscaping. But by contrast, the new 6-storey building is 3 times taller and is closer to the road and will present a stronger presence in the street scene, which will change the character and increase the built-up feel. But I feel in this particular setting, the landmark building feel is acceptable and appropriate in this vicinity. So although it will do all those things, it will dominate, I think that is a positive in this regard. Although, of course, it could set a precedent for further high-rise building as part of the hospital application per se in the future. And one small point with regard to the car park, however that might pan out, the new proposed new car park should be completed and available before the existing car park is closed for redevelopment. There is nothing within the report that I could see with regard to that. Again, if there is and I've missed it, my apologies. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. With regard to your item regarding COVID, I do not think that as a planning board it is for us to determine what should and shouldn't be put in place with regards to COVID. That is purely an NHS point of view. This application was made long before the COVID outbreak, and as unfortunate as that is, I'm sure the NHS have made any provisions that they will deem necessary with regards to that. We are purely looking at the outline submission of this application that is in front of us today, and I fully understand your points on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that clarity. It's extremely kind of you. Thank you.
Councillor Bartlett, I believe you wish to make a move.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to move to grant the application in accordance with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. I would be happy to second that move. I would like to say a few words. Firstly, I would like to say thank you to Mr. Burridge. A great deal of work has gone into this, and I understand it has been taking a long time for yourself to come back and get everything sorted for us. I think this application is going to be of a great benefit for BCP area as a whole and for the local residents, but I also appreciate it does cause some concern with regards to traffic. Unfortunately, the old saying says you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, and this is the same with all the cycle lanes that we are planning to put in and extra bus travel, etc. We can provide it, but whether people decide to use it is up to their own volitions. Mr. Burridge, I notice that you would like to speak.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your comments. So it was just to come back on one point which was made about the phasing. I just thought I would highlight the phasing plan that was put up in the presentation was purely indicative, and there would be a condition attached to the planning permission with regards to the phasing, which would obviously need careful consideration as part of future deliberations. And just on that point, the condition which was suggested by the report, the applicant did ask for a slight change to that condition, which I could find and read to you if you like, but we don't feel that it would go to the heart of what the condition was asking for.
Thank you, Mr. Burridge. Was that included on the update that came out?
No, it wasn't. Sorry, that's why I mention it now.
Would you please just clarify that for members, please, Mr. Burridge?
I will do, yes. Can you just bear with me a minute where I try and find it? Apologies for this. Sorry, I did have it open beforehand, but it seems to have lost itself.
Are members happy that, as Mr. Burridge is having difficulty finding that we will be satisfied with the rewording of the condition he is proposing? Yes.
I'm happy, Chair.
Can we ask what the condition is about, Chairman?
Yeah.
So the condition was about phasing. It was just a suggestion which the applicant had to amend the condition. They've said the phasing of the development has not yet been confirmed. The submitted plan is illustrative only. So as I've told you, the indicated phasing could change and/or construction phases could overlap. We therefore propose that the condition is amended to read: no development should take place until a scheme for the phasing of the development to be carried out has been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. The development shall be undertaken in accordance with the approved phasing plan, subject to any amendments approved in writing by the local planning authority. The submission of reserved matters shall relate to each phase of the development. So it was just to highlight that the phasing would be subject to a condition, and we were sort of happy to support that amended description. Or amended.
Thank you, Mr. Burridge. Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if I can suggest an amendment to the grant that we add to the proposal, subject to a satisfactory public transport solution, and for any modifications based on experience from COVID-19 to be added to the final consideration. I think it's important to get our concerns in place now and not be told that it's never mentioned in the outline application.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Mr. Evans or Mr. Gould, would you like to come back on that, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. Just thinking on Councillor Trent's point there, I think it's important that any form of mitigation that the council is going to secure through this application is directly relevant and necessary to the proposals that are before us. My concern would be that if we leave the net too sort of loose and open without sort of really buttoning it down, then we leave ourselves open to challenge further down the line. Obviously, the report sets out in terms of the highway considerations and what would go into Section 106 in terms of mitigation, and that is sort of focused on addressing the mitigation that is required for this proposal. My concern would be, listening to Councillor Trent's comments there, that it appears to be sort of too open-ended at the moment, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Gould. Councillor Stribley, you wish to speak?
Sorry, yes, Chairman. I just wish to totally disagree with Councillor Trent's proposal. We are not developers, we are enablers, and we have to deal with the application before us. I would suggest the motion is put, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stribley. Councillor Bartlett, are you happy that we go ahead with your move?
I am, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. In that case, we have a move from Councillor Bartlett, seconded by myself, and the move is to grant. I will call each councillor's name in turn, and would you please indicate on how you wish to vote? Starting with Councillor McCormack.
For.
Councillor Barron.
Against.
Councillor Bartlett.
For.
Councillor Davies. Councillor Davies.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Butt.
For.
Councillor Hall.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Pabiden.
For.
Councillor Lawton.
For.
Councillor O'Neill.
For.
Councillor Stribley.
For.
Councillor Trent.
Against.
And myself, Councillor Kelsey, I am for. Mr. Tyler, could you give us the results of that, please?
Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. I just noticed that you didn't ask for Councillor Simon Ball's vote on that one.
I do apologise, Councillor Ball. Very sorry about that. Councillor Ball.
Against.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Councillor Tyler.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to top those up and make absolutely sure of the vote. So if you don't mind giving me a couple of seconds.
Not a problem.
Thank you, Chairman. So the total number of votes for the motion is 11. The total number of votes against the motion is 3, and there were no abstentions. So that motion has carried. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Tyler. So as you've heard, members, that application is granted as per the officer's recommendations. Mr. Tyler, is it now appropriate to have a comfort break, what should be our lunch break, and come back at, shall we say, 1:15 to commence the rest of the meeting?
Chairman, yes, that is at your discretion. I would advise on a lunch break so that we can all have a refreshment and a suitable lunch before the committee consider the next application. So if you're happy with that, Chairman, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Barron, you have requested to speak.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations on your chairship.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I've got to leave the meeting now.
Okay.
Something has cropped up that I'll have to deal with. So yeah, I'll have to leave the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barron. Councillor Bull. Councillor Bull.
I'm rabbiting away without unmuting myself. I was just checking, really, Chair, the vote. It's 11 for and 3 against. That makes 14. Are we missing a councillor?
No, Councillor Hilliard did not vote due to making a statement at the beginning, Councillor Bull.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we're all at home, with the deepest of respect, we're not too far from our kitchens, I hope. Could we possibly reconvene at 1? I have a hospital appointment this afternoon I cannot miss, and I have my next item is with regard to my ward. I'd be extremely grateful.
That is fine. 1 o'clock is fine with me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Stribley.
Chairman, I was going to suggest exactly what Councillor Butt has just suggested, so I'll second that.
In that case, we will close this part of the meeting now and reconvene at 1 p.m. Enjoy your lunches, everybody. Mr. Jones, could we stop the recording, please?